Namaste. I and you pray. So we come to the end of Book 3 of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Haughton Woods. At least I think we're going to come to the end. I don't see why we're not going to. 54. The intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination is a deliverer. Has all things as its object, and has all times for its object, and is an inclusive whole without sequence. The word deliverer, taraka, means that it arises out of its own vivid light, without further suggestion. Remember, that's one of the aspects of Luciferianism, is that you bring out a light that, because you're bringing it out, it's definitely your light now. Well, no way of speaking. For it has all things for its object. This means that there is nothing that is not its object. It has all times for its object. This means that it has intuitive knowledge at all times of one whole, sarvam, past and future and present, with the sum of its states. An inclusive whole without sequence means that it grasps one whole, striking upon the thinking substance at one moment, with all its times. Such, in its complete form, is the intuitive knowledge, proceeding from discrimination. Of the same, the lamp of yoga is a part, beginning with a honeyed stage, until it reaches final perfection. Having thus shown a part of the object of intuitive knowledge, proceeding from discrimination, he gives the distinguishing characteristic of the intuitive knowledge itself, which proceeds from discrimination. 54. The knowledge proceeding from discrimination is a deliverer, has all things as its object, and has all times for its object, and is without sequence. He points out intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination as the object of the statement. The rest is the characteristic mark. It is called the deliverer because it delivers from the ocean of the round of rebirths. He distinguishes from the vividness which was previously 333. Mentioned by saying has all times for its object, with the sum of its states, means in all its subordinate particulars. Hence the intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination is complete, for there is nothing in any place or in any way or in any time that is not in the sphere. If you don't have to die to yourself, maybe you've been perfected. Maybe you just need to maintain. Nothing needs to die anymore. Why speak of the astam, of other kinds of knowledge? For even concentration, conscious of objects, is a part of this completed intuitive knowledge. So then there is nothing more complete than this, he says. Of this same, the lamp of yoga is a part. The lamp of yoga is a concentration, conscious of an object. How does that begin and how does that end? The reply is the honeyed, the truth-bearing insight. 148 is itself the honey, because it gives a flavor, as it has been said. Comment on book 147. Having risen to the undisturbed calm of insight, beginning with that which has this, with the honeyed stage, until it is finally perfected, until insight, sevenfold in advancing stages, book 229, has reached its highest. Hence intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination becomes the deliverer, since even a part of it, the lamp of yoga, is a deliverer. In either case, whether one has attained to the intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination or has not attained to intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination. 55. When the purity of the sattva and of the self are equal, there is isolation. When the sattva of the thinking substance is freed from the defilement of the rajas and the tamas, and when it has no tax other than with the presented idea of the difference of the sattva from the self, and when the seeds of the hindrances within itself have been burned, then the sattva enters into a state of purity equal to that of the self. When this is so, purity is the cessation of the experience which is falsely attributed to the self. In this state of purity, isolation follows for one who has supremacy, Ishvara, or for one who has not supremacy. For one who partakes of the intuitive knowledge proceeding from the discrimination, or for another. For if there be intuitive knowledge, in the case of one whose hindrances have become burned seed, there is no further need of any supernormal power, as being the means of purifying the sattva, both the supremacy, Ichvarya, proceeding from the concentration and the intuitive knowledge, there have been introduced into the discussion. But strictly speaking, the intuitive knowledge represses not sight, adarchana. When this is repressed, there are no more hindrances. Because there is no more hindrance, there is no fruition of karma. In this state, the aspects have their tasks get done. Wait. Did I miss a word? The aspects, their task is done, do not again submit themselves as objects for sight to the self. That is the self's isolation. Then the self, having its light within itself, becomes undefiled and isolated. Of the exposition of the comment on the Patanjali treatise, the book of the supernormal powers, the third. Having described the various constraints together with their supernormal powers, all of which indirectly prepare the way for isolation, with the intent to show that the intuitive knowledge of the difference between the sattva and the self leads directly to isolation, he here introduces the sutra by the words, whether one has attained. Whether intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination has been attained or not, nevertheless, the insight into the difference between the sattva and the self always brings isolation to pass. This is the meaning. 55. When the purity of the sattva and of the self are equal, isolation. The last word, ete, is meant to indicate the end of the sutras of this book. The words, one who has supremacy, refer to one who has the powers of action and of intuitive knowledge by reason of the constraints previously described. The words are, for one who is not supremacy, refer to one who partakes of the intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination by reason of the constraint described, Book 2, 52, immediately before. The words are, for another, refer to one in whom this intuitive knowledge has not risen into consciousness. For these cases there is no need at all for supernormal powers. For he says, for no. And if it should be objected that there is no need of supernormal powers in connection with isolation, and therefore instructive in them is useless, in reply, the reply is, as being the means of purifying the sattva, the instrument case is used to indicate such a kind of a mark. What's that stand for? 2:3:21. For the attainment of isolation, the supernormal powers are not absolutely useless, but they are not directly causes. This is the meaning, but it is the intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination that is the topic under discussion, and that which is a cause indirectly. The powers is only a figurative cause, not a primary cause. Strictly speaking, however, insight alone is the principal cause, and not the discrimination. This is the meaning. By the words intuitive knowledge, he means the elevation. In this book, the indirect aids and the aids of the mutations have been treated at length, and the attainment of supernormal powers, and among these powers, the intuitive knowledge proceeding from discrimination. Such is the stanza which summarizes the contents of this book, the explanation of the comment on Patanjali's treatise, which explanation is entitled The Clarification of the Entities, composed by the Venerable Vachas Patimitra. The third book on supernormal powers is finished. So that would be the small print, right? So, who are, like I said in the White Initiation, who are you beyond all this program? And who are you beyond the fact, okay, you gotta, there's deeds, there's beliefs, but who are you underneath that? Are you being this for itself? Um, are you isolating yourself from that which is not your higher purpose? The term white magic in some incidences distinguishes itself from black magic in a definition by Aleister Crowley that black magic may have its results, but it's not that which is part of your true purpose. And I would say the true purpose is devotion. Um, and we can say, as I said, we're talking about a process here. So you got self-realization, self-actualization, self-mastery, and of course self-responsibility, because you've got to do it for yourself. You're liberated and you continue to be liberated. There's no reason to, you get to the point where there's no reason for any part of you to die. You've been reborn in whatever aspect of yourself that you look at, and that's why path working is important. But the next book is going to be isolation. And let's be careful not to result to extremes of that which would be abusive to ourselves, foods that are not good for us, or not eating the foods that are good for us because we're trying to be austere. We definitely need to regard life and the rights of life. So there are things to look at in those issues, and poisoning ourselves, killing animals in particularly cruel ways, like factory farming is commonly does. So, but anyways, Namaste, I and you bow. Hopefully not to each other as if we're gods, right?